LMU, certainly the value you place on interdisciplinary learning offers an important resource. What about I'm not familiar with it, so I'm just raising the question, but the resources of the School of Law, Business Administration and Communications, how can they address issues through the lens of gender in a global context? A second issue, just to mention under this, is migration. And I know it's an area where human rights violation fractures the coherence of contemporary society. And here the boundary of superficiality needs to be transcended. It's an area where you are well placed as LMU and surely challenged to explore in greater depth the bridges of collaboration and advocacy that can be built globally, drawing on the universality of our best traditions. In February of last year, I had the privilege of helping with translation at the World Forum for Theology and Liberation, which took place in Dakar, Senegal, during the World Social Forum. And because of West Africa's history as the center of the slave trade, the theme of migration was central. We visited the island of Gore, widely believed to have been the largest slave trading center on the African coast, through which something like 20 million Africans passed between the mid-1500s and the mid-1800s. Just a day before we were there, the World Charter of Migrants had been proclaimed on that island. It is a powerful document. I don't know if it is familiar in this context here. And it offers a strong and challenging critique. I just read one sentence. Migrants everywhere are deprived of the full exercise of their right to freedom, to movement, and to settle on our planet. They are also deprived of their right to peace and their economic, social, cultural, civic, and political rights guaranteed by various international conventions. The voices of migrants today challenge us to bring the full depth of theological reflection and praxis to the deep fissures in our society, in our global society, in imaginative, coherent, and creative ways. As RSHM, we have so many sisters who are involved, wonderfully involved in collaborative initiatives with other congregations here in the US, in England, in France, in Portugal, Italy, in ministry to immigrants and refugees. Just one example right here, LAMP, certainly is a collaborative project right here in Los Angeles, which is doing wonderful work. RSHM have also written and spoken out, engaged in lobbying and advocacy for change and legislation so that all may have life and dignity. But let's raise the question, to what extent could LMU, as a Catholic university with rich roots of Jesuit, RSHM, and CSJ traditions, help to develop a theology of migration that draws from the experience of people, and I believe there's something like 80 different languages spoken in Los Angeles. To what extent could that be explored? And I believe it's not enough to just advocate for local legislation in California without situating immigration in the global context of our world today. So to what extent can the theological praxis, legal resources, impassioned commitment of faculty and students creatively harness resources and knowledge to address the issue of human rights for migrants in a holistic and global way? How could this frontier challenge be better addressed through global networking? Slavery continues to haunt us today in new forms, most notably in the heinous transnational crime of trafficking in human beings. And as we know, this disproportionately involves and violates the human rights and dignity of millions of women and children worldwide. As RSHM, we have made a corporate stance against human trafficking. And through our International Justice and Peace and Integrity of Creation network, we try to join forces with others to raise awareness about it and act in concerted ways. And certainly here in our Western American province, the annual symposium, and you see two of the logos there, organized by our sisters here in collaboration with many other congregations, some of you present here this evening, is a wonderful way of heightening awareness, listening to the silenced voices of those who have been trafficked, and advocating for concerted action. We might ask, to what extent can LMU transcend disciplinary boundaries and harness its potential to address this issue? How can global networking better draw on the energy of our respective charisms? I turn briefly now to the transcending the boundary of narrowness, rediscovering universality. For the last 40 years, there have been glimpses of this inner urging of the Spirit of God moving us evermore in the direction of deeper and more profound integration of faith and justice as two sides of one coin in the economy of mission. I think we see this beautifully expressed in the LMU mission statement, where the service of faith, promotion of justice are inextricably linked. As religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary, back in 1975, our chapter expressed what the bishops had articulated 4 years earlier in the document Justice in the World, that justice is a constitutive element of the preaching of the gospel and not an optional extra. We recognize that we were called to educate for a new consciousness, resisting those structures and systems that cause injustice and finding ways to put talents and resources at the service of the call to justice. Our RSHM mission statement clearly expresses this. I won't read the whole thing because of time, but just highlighting a few words. Gospel and our founders urging us to respond the needs of our time, work with others in action for evangelical justice, dignity, life of our sisters and brothers, the voiceless, the powerless. These words continue to be very much at the heart of our mission choices today. And what has this meant over the last few decades? I share just a couple of examples with you from different parts of the world. Not without struggle, this clear corporate commitment that we made back in '75 helped us to see the option for the poor not as separate but as integral to our mission, no matter what our ministry. Our option for the poor was not in competition. For a while, I think we talked about our justice ministries and our educational ministries. And then we came to see that this called for a transformation. It shattered the neatness of clearly defined boundaries. All our works need to be about the praxis of justice as well as the expression of faith. What are some of the small ways this has already happened? And how could this invite us to better use the opportunity that LMU's educational mission provides to produce persons of solidarity and leaders in transforming society? I just share an example from Brazil very briefly. We had 5 schools in Brazil, and each of these were asked to help set up and sponsor an educational project in a very poor area, a favela. After-school programs for poor children, they very often were. Now, this wasn't just about money. This was something about interaction. It was about young people coming together It was about planting seeds of understanding. It was about friendship. It was about children from better off areas being exposed to the poverty of the favelas. And it was about the experience of engagement together in bettering life. It is in this human interaction that transformation has happened. And so the miracle of some of these projects, Project Padre Gaiac, that we have several of them around Brazil, it was not just the financial support, not just the administrative support, but the broadened perspective of staff and students whose lives became mutually challenged, engaged, intertwined, and enriched. I turn briefly, and I'll just mention these, but I have to mention this one because we've had a wonderful engagement between our international schools in Europe. Each of them was twinned with a country in Africa. And there again, fundraising, educational visits, experiences, enriched the learning of the young people who were involved in it. This has happened to support projects in Mali and Mozambique, in Zambia and Zimbabwe. The engagement of young people in the north has often been transformative for them and their teachers and their families, helping to promote a global consciousness and deepening the experience of solidarity with those in need. Students have been empowered to exercise their voices, commit themselves to transformative change. We also have now an international network of schools that has been set up. And gradually this has broadened to engage schools that we once ran and have now been handed over to lay leadership. And I think that Father Nicolas, when he said this, it seems to me until now we have not fully made use of this extraordinary potential for universal service as institutions of higher education. I think he is referring to this global voice that I mentioned in relation to Jubilee 2000. More effective networking can allow the benefits of Jesuit co-sponsored higher education to be spread more universally in today's world.